Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for being here and for your incredible patience. I hope you're all able to defrost over the next little while as we prepare to celebrate these three wonderful books. And I can assure you it is well worth the wait. We have three wonderful writers here who we're enormously fond of, and we can't believe that they're all here together for a single evening. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered here in Treaty 1 territory. That is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Inuit, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, of course, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are here to celebrate three new middle grade novels and three wonderful middle grade writers. Those are, of course, to my left, Sidura Ludwig, Carol Matus, and Colleen Nelson. We're very grateful to all of them for being here, for all of you, for your tolerance and for sticking around, and to all of you watching on YouTube as well. Thank you for joining us here tonight. We're also very grateful, of course, to Nimbus Publishing, Pajama Press, and Orca Book Publishers who put out these books, and without whom we would not be gathered here tonight. Now, each of our readers will be introducing the other this evening, so I won't take up too much of your time right now. I'll just let you know that there will be a series of readings from the podium, including one with a very special guest. And we'll then be moving along to a conversation about middle grade fiction on the chairs to my left. Following that, there'll be an opportunity for you folks to ask questions as time permits. I'll circulate with this handheld microphone, not because we don't trust you to project, but it just ensures that those watching on YouTube can hear your questions. But for now, I'm so pleased to call up our first author this evening, Sidura Ludwig.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm actually, I'm just going to start by welcoming everybody, and I will be reading at the end, but I'm going to have the opportunity to introduce our first writer. But before I do, I want to thank McNally Robinsons and especially John for having us here this evening. I want to thank my co-writers for joining me, and all of you for, I didn't have it on my bingo card for tonight that there would be a fire of them. So I'm sure you didn't either, but thank you so much for sticking it out and for being here. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first writer. Colleen Nelson is a teacher and author of almost 20 books for young people, including her newest early middle grade title, Mystery at the Biltmore. A few recent accolades she's rather proud of, and she should be, include a TD Literature Award nomination for The Umbrella House, another fantastic book if you're looking for one, winning the Silver Birch Award for the Undercover Book List, and being a finalist for the Governor General's Award for Harvey Holds His Own. She's thrilled to be here tonight with Carol, one of her favorite authors for longer than either of them needs to discuss, I could say the same, and new friend me, Sidura. So I'm going to pass it over to Colleen.
Thank you so much, Sidura, and thanks everybody for being here. Yeah, so for our folks at home, we got to embrace some of our wonderful Winnipeg winter weather for a little while tonight. So I'm going to be reading from Mystery at the Biltmore, which is my most recent book. It is about two kids who live in New York City, which I lived in with my husband for so many years. That holds a very special place in my heart. So I'll start with chapter 1, Elodie LaRue. Elodie LaRue lived in number 5D at the Biltmore, which, according to everyone who lived there, was the best building in New York City's Upper West Side. She had a West Highland Terrier named Carnegie, who was Scottish by birth, but a New Yorker through and through. Elodie's mother and father were globe-trotting art crime investigators and rarely home. Luckily, they employed Miss Rosa to care for their daughter and her dog. "Can I go with you?" Elodie asked her parents as they dashed out the door, hot on the trail of an art thief. "It's summer vacation. I don't have anything to do." "No, darling, you'd only slow us down," Dad said, perching his fedora on his balding head. "Why don't you find some useful employment?" Mummy suggested, kissing Elodie quickly on each cheek. "Like what?" she asked, but neither answered. They were already out the door. Elodie was too young to babysit, and dog walking wouldn't work. She wasn't allowed to go further than the wrought iron gates at the entrance of her building. She needed a job that she could do right here at the Biltmore. Perhaps a detective agency, Miss Rosa suggested, as she, Elodie, and Carnegie walked home, loaded down with groceries from their weekly trip to Zamar's. "You've got the skill set, you're observant, logical, and you ask the right questions." "There are a lot of mysteries at the Biltmore," Elodie said. "So many," Miss Rosa agreed, "and who better to solve them than the daughter of the famous LaRue detectives?" Elodie's excitement grew. Perhaps if she proved herself at the Biltmore, her parents would let her join them on their next case. That afternoon, she put up a sign in the lobby. Detective for hire, competitive rates, no case too small. Contact Elodie LaRue, number 5D. Not a day later, she'd woken up to find an envelope slipped under the front door. It was addressed to Elodie. Dear Detective LaRue, we need your help urgently. Mrs. Vanderhoff's jewels have disappeared. Sincerely, Agnes, housekeeper, number 9F. Mrs. Vanderhoff was well known to all the residents of the Biltmore. As a renowned landscape architect, she planned gardens for wealthy clients all over the world. She'd also completed the redesign of the Biltmore's courtyard. With its brick paths, fountains, stone benches, and manicured shrubs, it was now the envy of the other buildings. The courtyard may have been filled with tulips and azaleas in the spring and roses and hydrangeas in the summer, but the residents knew it was more than just a garden. In a city where it was easy to feel lost and overwhelmed by the hustle and bustle, the courtyard made the building of 108 apartments feel like a neighborhood within a neighborhood. The jewel of a sheltered park tucked between Broadway and West End Avenue was the heart of the building. Well, we're off, Elodie called out to Miss Rosa, who was working in her art studio. Elodie's parents had met Miss Rosa at an art event. They needed a nanny, and Miss Rosa seemed the perfect fit. She was fluent in 3 languages, a rising star in the art world, and had worked as a nanny once before. They hired her on the spot. Luckily for everyone, Miss Rosa and Elodie got along like 2 peas in an Upper West Side pod. That's my favorite line in the whole book. I love reading that. We have our first case. By we, Elodie meant she and Carnegie. Her dog would be an invaluable member of her team. It wasn't just Carnegie's keen sense of smell and hearing. Elodie had observed that people relaxed when a dog like Carnegie was around. Friendly and well-behaved, it was impossible not to fall in love with her. Today, Carnegie looked especially adorable. Her plaid bow matched the one in Elodie's hair. That was fast, Miss Rosa exclaimed. Just like you said, the Biltmore is full of mysteries. Elodie tried to keep her excitement from bubbling over. Detectives needed to keep their cool. There's been a robbery. Mrs. Vanderhoff in number 9F has lost her jewels. Miss Rosa sighed. Be careful, she's likely to blame her housekeeper. Why do you say that? Elodie pulled her investigation diary out of her pocket. Miss Rosa shrugged as if the answer was obvious. Housekeepers look like they're the most obvious suspects, but don't assume anything before you have proof. There's often more to the story. Elodie frowned, considering Miss Rosa's comments. It was true that housekeepers often knew a family inside and out, but to automatically make them a prime suspect in a robbery seemed unfair. She'd keep an open mind, as she always did. But detectives needed to put their opinions aside when it came to cracking a case. Elodie paused at the door, not quite ready to go. Miss Rosa raised her eyebrows. Is there something else? Do you think people will be bothered that I'm, well, a kid? Elodie asked. She tightened her grip on Carnegie's leash. Miss Rosa gave her one of those stares that accompany telling the absolute truth. So what if they are? That's their problem, not yours. Has there ever been a detective my age? Elodie's nerves were getting the better of her. Just because there hasn't been doesn't mean there can be. Miss Rosa winked and nodded at the door. Now go on, my acrylic paint is going to dry before the canvas is finished. Armed with Miss Rosa's words, Elodie and Carnegie set out to meet their first client. Yeah. And Mary Lou was reading along with me, so hopefully I didn't make any mistake. Okay, so first of all, Sidura was the one who got the whole ball rolling, so I want to say a huge thank you to you for organizing everything. And then Carol was the one who sent me the email. And I just need to give some context and background that when I was in grade 5, my 2 favorite teachers taught me, and it was Ms. Green and Mr. Matus, and I know that some of their family is here. And the reason I love them so much was because they let us do writing club, and we got to just write. And I'm a teacher now, and I see what happens when my students just get to write, and it is the most magical moments in my classroom. So I always say that the reason I became a writer was because I had Mr. Matus and Ms. Green, and they let us just experiment and just do things and let us be kids with imagination. One of the other things that happened that year was that Carol had released her book, and Mr. Matus, like John now, because I'm a grown-up, he read it to us. Like, as a kid, when you see books on a shelf, that you don't understand really that there's a human behind it that has written. And so when he would read the book, we were just enraptured. And part of it was because he gave us some behind the scenes information, and we knew that this was his sister who had written the book. So through the years, I've always read Carol's books, and I love them, and they are in my classroom, and Daniel's story continues to be one of the books that I give to my students when they say they don't know what they want to read, and they love it as much as I did and still do. So to be up here with her is it's just like the coolest full circle moment for me. That all being said, Carol Matus is an internationally acclaimed author of over 47 books for children and young adults. Her best-selling work, which includes 3 award-winning series, has been translated into over a dozen languages. She has received over 100 well-deserved books and honors and awards, including the Sidney Taylor Book Award, the Geoffrey Bilson Award for Historical Fiction, and 2 nominations for a Governor General's Literary Award. Carol lives in Winnipeg. She has a number of beautiful grandchildren, and she told me which one is her favorite. So I will share that information with them later. And her new book, Zevi Takes the Spotlight, is about a 13-year-old aspiring actor, Zevi, who is unwilling to be thrust into the spotlight when the media discovers his secret abilities. But can he use those psychic powers to save the lives of a famous movie star? You have to read the book to find out. And Carol, come on up.
Well, then I don't know where to start now with the thank yous. So first of all, thank you to Sidura. Thank you to McNally's. See you back there, John. Very much for having us. Okay. John, well, perfect.
It was being disagreeable.
And Colleen, my heart. That was, okay, now I'm getting all verklempt, and you know, that was really such a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. Very, very sweet. And by the way, these 2 wonderful writers are also incredibly supportive. So it's wonderful to be here with both of them. Yes, and all my grandchildren are here too. Now, I'd like to introduce you to my grandchild, not true about the favorites, other grandchildren that are here. Kai, who has agreed to read with me. So I'll just set it up a little bit. This is actually Zevi, who is 13, and Kai will be reading Zevi. I will be reading his best friend Nir. And Kai has just been discovered to be the psychic who saved a little girl, and he's kept his psychic abilities secret. Zevi. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, getting them completely mixed up. Yes, Zevi, that's another story, which I will tell you later, about how this book came to be. Zevi Takes the Spotlight. Okay, so Zevi is the psychic. He has been discovered as being a psychic, and he didn't want to be famous for that. He wanted to be famous for being an actor, but it's all out now because he saved this little girl. And now we're going to start in chapter 2. Okay, here we go. And thank you for the correction. I would have said that the whole night. You go.
What is it like being famous? I stare. What's her name? Lily? Or maybe it's Loon. She must be the 15th person to ask me that today. She's one of the popular kids, and she has never noticed me before. The hallway's finally empty, except for 2 of us. I've been mobbed out here, answering questions every class change. Zevi, who's going to win the Stanley Cup? Zevi, should I go with John or Jordan or whoever? What about the latest Jays trade? Then there are the others. Zevi, you're a total freak. Zevi. And to make it even more annoying, half of them can't pronounce my name right. Zevi is one I hear a lot. Zev, I correct them, and then add the long E. They don't really listen, though. They aren't interested in me, just the answers I can give them, which I mostly can't, or won't. Near barrels down the hallway and saves me, as usual. He's so tall for a 13-year-old. He looks like a high schooler. I'm almost as tall as Near, so the two of us stand down in the hallways. Coach Briggs is always glaring at me because I chose drama club over basketball, unlike Near. Coach takes that as a personal assault.
Zevi, come on, we're late for class.
Near grabs me by the arm and puts some distance between us and whoever that girl is. I can hear the disbelief as we start walking down the hall. Hello? I guess no one ever walks away from her when she's talking, like ever.
So have you heard?
Near asks me, what?
Guess who's coming here to film a movie?
Who? I ask.
Guess.
Who?
Robert Lemon.
Near says, really?
Really?
The movie? Oh, that's
I'm just jumping in. Wait, there's more. What? Yeah, we'll jump there.
what? I asked.
They're auditioning for extras. I'm going to send in my picture. You should too. I mean, maybe we could even be in a scene with him.
You and the rest of the city, I say. Anyway, you hate acting. Why would you do it?
Because it's Robert Lemon, obviously.
Near says.
And you know he's Jewish.
He adds. Yeah, I answer, rolling my eyes. Every Jewish kid, including me, Near, knows that Robert Lemon is Jewish. We finally get to class. Miss Foster gives us both a look for being late. We sit down and I open my math book. I think about what Near told me. I've been an extra in 2 movies and 1 TV episode. It's mainly standing around, then more standing around. I find it interesting though, because I get to watch the actors and try to learn from them. And learning from Robert Lemon would be amazing. But suddenly, I see a black cloud all around me. I've seen that before. Over the years, whenever that happens, I see bad things. I see bad things almost always happen.
That's good.
Zevi, is anything wrong? Miss Foster asks me. I look up. No, why? Near whispers.
You kind of groaned out loud?
I check the room. Everyone is staring at me. I just saw a vision of my math mark, I say. Miss Foster smiles at me. The kids laugh. And Near whispers,
Zevi, what's up?
I shake my head. I'll tell him later. I'm in a movie. It must take place in the present or in the future. The set is sleek, white walls, white furniture, white media console, like an IKEA showroom. In front of me, a person dressed up in all black cap tilted over their eyes, black trench, black coat, black and white high tops. They're rolling a black weapon that looks like a phaser from Star Trek. At the front of the room is Robert Lemon. His hands are up in front of his face, and he's saying, no, 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 in a whisper. But the figure dressed in black shows no mercy. It has to be. The person shoots as the laser hits Robert Lemon. It scatters into countless bits of the light. In slow motion, Robert Lemon grabs his chest and dramatically sinks to the floor. His last words are, Zevi, I should have listened to you. Cut!
Thank you, Kai. That was awesome. It was so nice to hear it from the voice of the young man, Zevi, not Kai. And you can forgive me for being, well, I'll explain the whole grandchildren and Kai thing later. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the person who organized the whole evening, Sidura Ludwig. Sidura is an internationally acclaimed Canadian author who has been a finalist for the Giantess Literary Award, Carol Shields Winnipeg Book Award, and a runner-up in the Little Bird Short Story Contest. She recently won the 2021 Vine Award for Best Jewish Fiction for her debut short story collection, You Are Not What We Expected, House of Anansi Press. She also authored Holding My Breath. Her debut picture book, Rising, which is just beautiful. I recommend you all run out and get it. Illustrated by Sophia Vincent Guy, was published in 2024 by Candlewick. Her new book, Swan, The Girl Who Grew, is a brilliant and tender middle-grade novel in verse, reimagining the childhood of Nova Scotia giantess Anna Swan. And I was very lucky to get to read it before it came out. And it is a really beautiful, beautiful book. I don't know how she does it in verse, but she does. So please welcome Sidura.
Thank you, Carol, thank you, Colleen, for starting us off, and thank you again, all of you, for being here. So Swan is a middle grade novel in verse, historical fiction, and it is based on the life of a real life giantess who lived in the mid-1800s. Her name was Swan. She lived in Nova Scotia, and she grew to be almost 8 feet tall. And I won't talk too much about how I found the story, but when I did, I decided I wanted to reimagine what her childhood might have been like when she was 12 years old. So the novel is fiction, but based on a true story, and a lot of research, glorious research got to go into that. Nova Scotia is a gorgeous place to be. I would like to share with you a couple of the poems from the beginning. So I'm going to start with the first one. And so Millbrook, Colchester County, Nova Scotia, 1. I am a marvel. I am the biggest girl in Colchester County. I am 12 years old, and people look up to me like I carry some secret they need, but I don't know anything. I don't know why God made the ground so far from my head. I don't know why. My father has to use a ladder to mark my height at the side of our cabin, 6 feet, 10 inches. So far from my siblings' marks, I don't know why they don't grow like I do. Father can't keep up with my growing feet, can't spend all his time making me shoes, so mother takes me into town to meet the shoemaker, and everyone whispers, Anna's a marvel. When he measures my feet, when he clucks his tongue on the roof of his mouth, marvel, he mutters. It doesn't sound like a compliment. The way he shakes his head, the way the others crowd by the shop window and then part when we leave the store. I don't know why. God made me a girl who wishes she could hide, so easy for everyone to see. 2. I want a pair of ladies' boots that point at the toes and lace up around the ankle, then crisscross up the shin with thin laces that sit in a bow so delicate it falls like 2 hearts kissing. I want boots that will make me walk tick-tock, heel to toe, like a breeze so gentle you barely know it's there. Boots that will quiet my steps, that will hide beneath my skirt so I look like I'm floating. Boots as beautiful as cake, as pretty as my sister Maggie's soft brown eyes, her long lashes like ribbons. Our faces against the shop window, those boots, while mother discusses my feet inside. I want those, I point. But even Maggie, who knows how to dream big, even she shakes her head. Can't work in those Sunday boots, she sighs. Maggie's feet belong on a doll, and one day she'll have boots like these when she's married to a man whose head rests above hers. I am only 12, and I look up to no man. Mother walks out tick-tock beneath her floating skirt. We're going to wait a little longer, she says. The way your feet grow, he says best not to waste money on new shoes we'll only have to replace in 3 months. My toes pinch in the old shoes. Father made me the seams at my toes split, and my feet peek out like bread dough over rising. Maggie runs to catch up with us, and I don't look back, because the dream hurts more right now than my feet. 3. The pretty blue dress mother sewed for me in the spring is already torn at the shoulders. My body splits through clothes like a mountain rising through cracks in the earth. If God created a perfect world in only 7 days, why don't I fit anywhere? And that's where I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to hop back to my seat and we'll have the second part of it, okay? See if we, oh. You're appearing, John, like magic. Thank you. So, this is the fun part, I think, because I don't know about you guys, but I nerd out when it comes to talking about writing, and especially these days when it comes to talking about children's literature. And so I wanted to start off our conversation by asking Carol and Colleen, and I'll answer it too. Why write middle grade? What is it about middle grade, Carol?
Yeah, okay. There's really maybe I'll go back a little further. There's two reasons, but I think the first thing I ever wrote was middle grade, but I didn't know it at the time. I sat down and started to write a short story, and it was characters that were, I think, around 9 or 10. And that was a time in my life that I was very happy. Like Colleen, I had a great teacher, right? And I think that just made a huge difference. And I remember that time so vividly, and we had book club and we loved to read, and you know, it was just a magical time in my life. And you know, the first story I ever wrote was 2 kids, you know, who bump into a magical plant and end up shrinking and, you know, sort of have this adventure, but they were that age. And I just kept writing about kids that age. I didn't know at the time I was writing middle grade. In fact, I still just write about kids that age or kids older, and I let the publisher decide what age it's for, because I'm just writing for that age in that character. And people are like, "Oh, you're writing." I was like, "No, I'm writing about a 12-year-old or about a 15-year-old, right?" That's you know. And I think the other thing is that I love that age. You know, then as I sort of started to realize that yes, there was an audience, and I was sort of writing for that audience. It's just a perfect age to write for if you want to change the world, because you know, and it's like that age where they're old enough to understand absolutely everything. There's nothing that you cannot write for them, but they're young enough that they're not fixed in their ideas, right? So you can still change their minds, you can still get them thinking about things. And I think in each of my books, I have the story, and then I have the question. And it's always, you know, I'd like to throw in that question or that theme so that when they're finished reading, maybe they're thinking about something like for the Burning Time, feminism, for, you know, for the Holocaust books, anti-Semitism, but whatever it is, there's something deeper that where they can go if they want to. Or they can just read it, like in Zevi Takes the Spotlight. It's a mystery and it's about a psychic, but it's really about fame and what's fame about, and maybe think about that. Because do we all want to be social influencers? I don't know. Maybe it'd be better to be something else, right? So there's always that other level. And yeah, I think those are the, oh, and I'll just throw in one last thing. Just the pleasure of reading. It's a really good age too to sort of catch kids and say, yeah, you could really enjoy reading and you can just really love reading. I once got an email, I don't know if it was an angry email or a complimentary email from a woman who said her kid, they'd taken the kids to Florida for a long weekend, and her child spent the entire weekend in the condo reading my book. And I was like, thank you for telling me that. But as I say, I'm still not sure, but that's a great compliment and a great thing.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, yeah. Colleen?
Well, I agree with everything. I'm just gonna agree with everything you said. It's really very boring. Whatever Karen said, I say too. So for me, I think when I'm writing, I'm also imagining a teacher reading the book to their students. So I like that idea of a classroom of students listening, or I mean, I read to my boys until they were, well, probably older than they want me to admit publicly, but that act of reading something out loud and having this shared experience, I think that's, like you say, that middle grade age when you can do that, I think that's really exciting. So for me, that's what I'm thinking of as I'm writing. And then just the way that you can create a world and the readers are so open to experiencing it with you. I've also written YA books. That's actually what I started writing. And the issues that you address in YA, I just find like now the way our world is, I really like the softer, gentler themes that, and the way you can present the ideas in middle grade. That just feels right for me right now.
I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I come at a little different to this panel because my first two books were for adult, and then the picture book, and this is actually my first middle grade. So, you know, I get the joy of, oh my gosh, you know, discovering writing for middle grade. It was, for me, this book was middle grade because that's what the story called for it to be. And you know, when I was deciding how I wanted to tell Anna's story, I thought very much about her at that 12-year-old age, which is an age of such change, not just, you know, in our bodies in general, but also emotionally and everything. And I also thought about, you know, who else had already written about Anna Swan and what audiences didn't know about her, and there really was very little for middle grade. So that was kind of how I but I have found since then that the work that I'm trying to get out now, and it's taking a lot longer than I thought, but it's also that middle grade. And I think to go back to what you were both saying about, you know, creating the world, about the gentler, there's an element of hope that really rests in a lot of these books. So you can deal with some very difficult issues, but the books always, you know, are always ending or, you know, heading towards an area of hope, and that's a space I like to be in.
Yes,
I like to be in as well.
and you do see a lot more authors finding middle grade and then staying there. A lot of YA authors have started to come down to that age group, so I do think there's something to that.
Interesting. All right, Carol, I'm gonna punt it over to you.
Okay, I love your thing about hope. I think that's really so true. So I have a question for, is it for you, Colleen, or for, yeah, okay. Let's see. Okay, I've written it out. I love how you started Mystery of the Biltmore, and we just all heard it, so there you go. That's good. It broke the mold in terms of a typical mystery for young people, because usually the lead character is an accidental detective. But within the first few chapters, Elodie is a detective, she's got a case, and then we're fully into it. What inspired this approach? Because yeah, that was really like, unless you're writing about the young Sherlock Holmes, right? Yeah, this is a very different book, which I loved, by the way. I just thought it worked so well. So
yeah, so first of all, the background on the book is that there's a show on Disney Plus called Only Murders in the Building. And
we're in the middle of it.
My husband and I were watching it over last Christmas winter break, and we just got like super into it. And so of course I started doing like a rabbit hole research thing and was very curious about the building that actually exists. It does exist, and it's called the Apthorpe. So once I discovered that, then I thought that this would make an amazing location for a kid's book. And okay, so now I have my premise, and I actually, through spending too much time online, already knew who the culprit was going to be because I had seen an actual story online. So I had my beginning and I had my ending, and now all I had to do was get the middle. So that was where it started. Now, I am, a lot of my books, I write about 50 pages, and then that ends up being completely cut because the story actually started on page 50, and I should have just scrapped all the beginning and saved myself a lot of time. So this, in the last few books, I've really tried to just get right to the story, get the action going. I find at school, the books that the kids always find really engaging are the ones where the action starts straight away. So I did make a conscious effort to get right to the big mystery that Elodie has to solve.
I love that. I thought it worked so well.
Thank you.
And yeah, and you know, usually you're 3/4 of the way, or it's a whole book setting up for the next book for that kid to be the detective, right?
Yeah.
So you sometimes have to go through an entire book.
There's no origin story in this one.
Exactly.
It's straight to the
Yeah.
mystery. Yeah. Am I gonna ask Carol now?
Sure.
Okay. Or I'll ask Sidura, and that way it's a bit, is that okay with you?
That's
Awesome, okay. Well, can you share with us why you decided to write in verse?
why I decided to write in verse. You know, I almost feel like the verse found me rather than me consciously choosing. I first encountered Anna's story 12 years ago on a family vacation. And I knew that I wanted to do something with this story, but I wasn't quite sure what or how. And so over time, I would come back to it and try it in different formats, but none of it fit right. None of it felt right. And I didn't even know at that point that I was going to write for middle grade. But then I went back to school and did my MFA, my Master's of Fine Arts in Writing for Children and Young Adult at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. And through that program, I was reading a lot, you know, and so I was introduced to this, to the concept of a verse novel. And so I decided, you know, I'm like, oh, that sounds like that. I think I'd like to give that a try. So then I was researching for the Anna Swan and finding all these different elements about her life that were really appealing to me, and I felt there was a lot of energy there. And so what I would do is I would sit down, I would sort of say, okay, I'm going to write 5 to 10 poems a day. This was like early, not even a draft. This is almost a pre-draft, just to see like what has legs, what has interest. And when I sat down and started to write the book in verse, I felt like I could hear her voice, or at least hear it the way I wanted to hear it. And then I realized, you know, I don't think we think in full sentences. I think we actually think in verse poetry all the time. And so in terms of accessing her emotions, accessing her relationships with her family, with the other members, it was the verse format that gave me that corridor that I was really looking for.
So how many of the poems that you wrote made it into the book?
That's a good question.
That's just what I was gonna say.
Oh my gosh,
Good question.
I never counted them. I mean, I would imagine, you know, it was almost like a puzzle thing, because I wrote all these poems and then I sort of, finding the structure of the book was the hardest thing for me. What was the story going to be? Because it can't just be about musing about this character and about her existence. So once I figured out what my structure was going to be, then I could at least put in, you know, the poems that I already had and fill in the gaps that way.
So that's interesting. So you didn't know what the whole arc was going to be when you very first started?
No, I know. I
It's
wish
like a full
I was.
discovery.
Yeah, I wish I was more organized that way. But no, I really needed to. I really need, you know, and it's based on a true story, but the story in here is not a true story, right? And there was, so there were elements of it that come from her life. There were other elements that I made up based on my research, because I was, you know, ultimately it had to be about the story that I was telling.
Would you write another novel in verse?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not working on one right now, but I would 100%. Yeah. Or why don't you, I think you have a question for Carol.
Yeah. You ready?
I'm ready.
So I'm curious about your family, who clearly means so much to you. So in the book, Zevi was a memorable and endearing character with a very supportive family and friends. And I'm wondering what role your family and friends play in supporting you.
Yeah, I mean, great question, since I'm all about family. And yeah, sorry about my mistake earlier. Yes, it is Zevi and not Guy. So yeah, huge, really a big thing. I would like to maybe start off with Pea, my husband, who will hate this. But you know, every time I would write a first draft, he would read chapter by chapter. Sometimes I would read it to him, or he would read it, and his comment was always, "What happens next?" So, you know, and you know, in the early days when I was putting out 2 books a year, people would be like, "Why, you know, why are you writing so much?" I'm like, I have to tell Pea what happens next. You know, I have to keep up. Like, he needs to know. You know, I have to get this done. And it actually has a kind of funny backward effect as well, because then he loves everything I write, and then when you get the dreaded edit, right, from the editor, and you get like 20 pages of like notes, I'm like, but Pea says it's perfect. What's the matter with this person?
I
right?
want him to edit my stuff.
You know, like, right, so I get so angry, and it takes me like a week to calm down and say, oh, maybe they have a point, right? Because I'm like, oh, Pea says it's perfect, but I don't know. So yeah, so then, and then there's, you know, all my wonderful grandchildren who are here. And a lovely little thing about Zevi Takes the Spotlight. Originally, the title was Fame. And we were sitting around a Shabbat dinner one night and tossing around ideas. And Naomi, who's standing there at the back, my granddaughter, was like, Zevi Takes the Spotlight. And I was like, oh my God, that's just perfect. And,
Well done, Naomi.
and they loved it.
So you're giving
And
half
in
the
fact,
proceeds,
the
right?
reason
Yeah.
it's called Zevi, the character's name is Zevi, is because Zevi said to me, no one's ever gonna use my name because it's such a weird name. And I was like, challenge accepted, Zevi. Yes, they will, and it'll be me. So, and then once I used Zevi in this book, actually all my grandchildren are in the book as well as the 3 from Portland. They all have different parts, you know. So yeah, everyone's in there, even you, Mira. And of course, then I have just 2 other little things. Kai was the inspiration of my very first picture book. We were out for a walk one day and we were having a conversation about ants, what we might look like to ants, and that inspired me to write Who's Looking? How Animals See the World, which was really exciting at sort of this stage of my career and my life and my age. To start a whole new career writing picture books, it's just been fantastic. And I have another one coming out next year. And Mira and I are working on one right now, right, Mira? Called Mira and Maggie. So about Mira's crazy adventures, just trying to go and mail a letter for her mom. So that's trying to get sold right now. So yeah,
Amazing.
huge support to me. Oh, and don't let me forget, Rebecca and Naomi, my first readers. Rebecca used to read all my, after Pea, then it would be Rebecca, and she actually did edit, Rebecca. Yeah, she would actually be like, okay, Mom, this one isn't working, and sometimes she would help me get over big, you know, problems that would happen. So yeah, they're all in it with me, or I'm in it with them, or whatever.
Yeah. I think it must work both ways too,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like I'm sure all of them get inspired by you as much as you inspire. You know what I mean?
Rebecca's not even read Judas.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Right,
Thank you for
fantastic.
the question, Colleen.
All right, I'm keeping watch of the time, and I want to make sure that we have time for our audience to ask questions. Is it all right with you?
Yeah.
I want to toss it over
Sounds
now to the audience. Oh, here he comes.
John appeared from his magical land
Yeah.
backstage.
And did anyone have any questions?
Nobody needs to panic, because if you don't, we still have questions for each other.
Yeah.
Mind you, it's getting late.
Not an inquisitive crowd at the moment.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
if no one else is gonna, I asked you a question. Can I ask you a question, Sidura?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to ask what drew you to write about someone who's outside the mainstream, someone who's an outsider. Was there anything in your upbringing, for instance, that drew you to that subject, or is it just something that in a way is universal? Are we all outsiders in some way?
Thank you. So I think, the easy answer is yes, we probably are all outsiders in some way. Everybody at some point is going to feel as if they don't fit in, especially at that stage of your life when you're an adolescent. What drew me to write about Anna, and the reason why her story resonated with me so much is, so I walked into this room at this museum where, that is dedicated to her in Tatamagouche, Nova Scotia. And I felt like I was like almost hit, by this story. And I'm like, why am I feeling so strongly about this? And I realized, when you wouldn't know it to look at me now, I'm a pretty average 5'4", but I grew very early, or at least it felt like I was growing early when I was younger. And there was a stage of my life where I was, the tallest one, the tallest of all my friends, taller than my mom by the time I was 10, and I was afraid I would never stop growing. What happened to Anna Swan was my biggest fear, actually, was that I would end up being 8 feet tall. And so, that was the other reason why I decided to write from her at 12. And it was to access back, what what would I have needed to read when I was that age? I wanted to write the book that I needed to read when I was that age. You know, again, like it's a period of time in our lives where our bodies are changing. We have no control. I mean, we never have any control over our bodies, but particularly, you know, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, and I think about kids that age now, even though they're not going to be 8 feet tall, you know, they're going through all kinds of changes, and you can feel like you're on display when you don't want to be on display. Actually, you just kind of don't want anybody to notice you. That was certainly my experience. So for all those reasons, her story really resonated with me, and that was how I decided to access it.
And finding your place in the world.
Right, and then ultimately, yeah, so you feel that way, but then, you know, accepting who you are and recognizing your own strengths. And I think that Anna in real life was a real example for that. You know, she ended up going to work for P.T. Barnum in New York City in his Museum of Oddities. They called it the American Museum. She toured Europe with that group, met her husband, who was also a giant. She became a real celebrity, and by all accounts had a very fulfilling life. But before that, you know, she was a young girl who didn't know that that was going to be part of her future. And so what was it, you know, what could I imagine was her life to be able to get her to that point? Yeah.
Can I just ask one more question to Carol?
Of course.
Yeah, just give a bit of time. So many characters. There's some that have stayed with me, but I'm wondering if there's any characters you've written that have really stayed with you. Or do you forget all their names?
I do. You know, especially if it's like a 20-year-old,
Yeah.
30-year-old book, and you know, I'll be talking to a classroom and they'll be like, blah, blah, blah. I'll
I
be
know
like,
the book way better than
wait,
you
let me
do.
look at the back cover, right? Because the name is sure to be on the back cover, you know? So yes, I do forget their names. But you know, it's almost like that question of well, okay, maybe I do have some favorites. I would have to say that maybe the character from, and yeah, what's her name? From In My Enemy's House, which I think is Hannah.
I was so worried you were gonna
What?
say Rebecca.
Because that's a story of a young girl who's a Polish Jew who ends up living in a Nazi household. And that character and story has always really stayed with me because she actually loved the people that she ended up taking care of, the children and the family. And yet, of course, if they knew she was a Jew, they would murder her. The original title, I think, was A Stony Heart, right? And there's something about that, that story that is very almost heartbreaking to me. It's kind of broke my heart when I read it. And so it's kind of stayed. But yeah, in other ways, they're all like your children, you know, and you don't have favorites, you know, except for the new baby. So then I would say right now is Zevi,
Right.
right? Totally my favorite character right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the way it goes,
Yeah.
right? They turn over.
Colleen, do you have a favorite?
Character that I've written or a child?
A character?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I guess I have a soft spot for my Harvey series because the boy, the main character, who I'm pretty sure is named Austin. Just because those series, it's very special to me. It was like my first hardcover book, which for some reason was such a big deal to me. And so yeah, I just think of, it was my first time writing middle grade, like truly, and really embracing the voice. So I feel like that was a book that I felt like I'd finally come into my own. And when people said they liked the book, I was like, yeah, because like I believe you. Whereas before I used to be like, you're just saying that.
Or the favorite character could be Harvey, who
Well, yeah,
Let's face it,
100%. I do have a
absolutely
thing for
adorable.
writing dogs. Yeah, I know, it's becoming a bit weird, actually. I
very,
need to write a cat or
very,
something.
very cute dog. Well, for dog lovers,
That's
yes.
All right, I think I'm going to close it there and thank you all. So we are now, we get to sit at this lovely table over here and anyone who's interested in getting one of these books or any of the others, you know, by us that are available, you're welcome. Please come say hi. Thank you all for being here and for joining us this evening. I hope we warmed you up.
Yes, just as Sidura mentioned, the signing will begin over here. Just one thing that I'll put in your mind as well is that please do feel free to come up and have a copy of the book signed. You don't need to rush off and pay for it first. Just please do remember to pay for it at some point. Thank you again. Of course, I'm going to ask for one more rousing round of applause. So Sidura Ludwig.